Hey, nice to see everyone today. I'm Tom Castonzo with Democracy Brewing, and I have Mr. Michael Fernandez with me today. How you doing, Michael?
I'm good. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing swell. We have how bad can we be doing? We have some Michigan brew right here. Tonight we're drinking Founder's Mortal Bloom Hazy IPA. So, cheers. So here we're going to talk about we'll talk to Michael about uh, what he's up to in St. Joe. He's currently a St. Joseph City Commissioner running for re-election coming up here in November 4th.
November 4th on Tuesday.
Wow, it's coming up soon.
Yep, 5 days.
How you feeling?
Feel pretty good. It's been my first term. I was first elected in 2023, and 2 years has just really flown by. I feel like I just finished doing this, and next Tuesday I'm getting ready to plan a full day of door knocking and end it at Community Tap, where we're planning on waiting for the results. So feel free to come on by. Anybody that's listening, you guys would be more than welcome to wait for the results with us.
Yeah, cool. Where is Community Tap again?
Community Tap is inside the Market, right in downtown St. Joe.
Yeah.
But it feels like I was just there, getting the news that I had won the election 2 years ago, and we jumped straight into it. I got sworn in less than a week later, and immediately jumped, into the thick of things, trying to learn all about asset management and the city's budget and what we do. And it's here I am again, trying to do it for hopefully 4 more years this time.
All right, sounds good. So what got you into this politics? I mean, you're really young, which is great, but politics, that's usually something that you see people a lot older jumping into, and it's really cool that you're doing it. There has to be a story there.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think for me, my journey into becoming a city commissioner, like that was never the dream. I want to be a city commissioner, so I'm just I grew up in Berrien Springs. My parents are both immigrants. They came here from Cuba, and I grew up, with parents who had made a life change and come to a different country. And what they chose to do with their life, they were both state of Michigan employees, as was my grandfather, for over 30 years before they retired. So they devoted their life into public service. Later on, I would go on to meet my wife, and she is also works for the state of Michigan. She's a foster care specialist. And then ironically enough, my younger brother works there too. So I've just grown up around public servants. So I knew I wanted to do something. And rewind to 2022, I was working at a credit union. I had pivoted I used to work at Whirlpool, kind of grew up in their customer service organization, became a leader there for 10 years. And I got frustrated that I was working for a place that, and it's a great place to work. I learned a lot of skills there, but I got frustrated that what I was contributing to, I didn't see that in the world, right? It wasn't very community focused.
Yeah, right.
And having had the parents that I had, the relationships that I had, there was a pull to use my skills in that way. And there I was in 2022, working at a bank, feeling all right with what I was doing. And I met a guy who's become a very good friend. His name's Joey Andrews. And at the time he was running for state rep. And I got involved just as a volunteer. And as I got to know him more, and volunteering, in real campaigns, I realized, all of the things that I've learned, in my professional career, I can apply those skills to campaign work. There's a lot of parallels. And so I quit the corporate world, and and I started working on campaigns. I worked on Joey's campaigns. I was his campaign manager last year, and worked with a couple other nonprofits and other campaigns. But that's where I was in 2022. And in 2023, the city was in a position where we had there was a couple of city council members that had announced they were retiring. They didn't want to keep doing this. And there I was, someone that just made a career pivot into wanting to do more for his community. I was working at my day job, and there was going to be a city council race in my hometown. And I thought to myself, I'm a dad. I'm committed to living here for the rest of my life. This is where I'm raising my kids. Why not me? Why not bring a voice to people of my generation that are, I'm in my mid 30s, with the raising kids, and why not? So it worked out. I launched a campaign and I won, and I want to keep doing it.
That's really cool. So, what do you do outside of politics? It sounds like you have a family, you have some kids, yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you do outside of all of this
So
stuff?
my kids and my wife came up with a nickname for me. They call me Triple C Fernandez,
Well,
and it
do we want to know what those C's stand
you
for?
definitely do because
Okay.
they'll answer a little bit about what I do. But the kids know that being a commissioner is very important to me, and
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
family is really supportive of that. So that's one of the C's. Community organizer is the other C, and then the last C is I'm a coach.
Okay. Cool.
So sports have always been really big in my life, and my kids have all just grown up to be these little sports nuts. So I coach them. I've been coaching them flag football for the last 5 years, and I coached my oldest. He's 17 a few years ago too. So that's what I do. I'm a glorified taxi when I'm picking them up, taking them from school and their
Yeah.
activities.
Oh yeah.
But organizing and spending time with the family is what I do. We're big campers too. That also starts with a C.
Glamping
But
or like the real tent camping?
I am all about we bought a small
You're in
travel
Michigan.
trailer on purpose just because the point was, a nice comfy place to sleep, but get outside, go ride your bikes, go be in the woods, have campfires, roast marshmallows. So we started doing that in 2022. I grew up doing it. So big outdoors, football. So we do all the things.
Cool. Great. Great. Those are all great Michigan things.
All Michigan things. Yeah. So which,
Yeah.
and
Take advantage of it.
it all just adds, to reasons why I'm, serving as a commissioner and why I'm, really excited about running again because I really like, having my family and having all those things as options. Um, as a commissioner, I get to play a role in making that a reality for other people. St. Joe is, something that's very important to me is it's been a community that it's been shrinking, right? So
Yeah.
I was excited to bring the perspective of younger
Yeah.
generation of families to the council.
Yeah.
But part of the reason we need that is because that's what we've been losing for years and years in St. Joe. We've been watching our population decline. If you look at a census chart, from this, you can track St. Joe. It grew, and in the 70s, it kind of peaked at about 13,000 people, and ever since then, it's just been less and less every year. Um, when I took office, we had about 7,704 residents, and one of my mini goals is I wanted to see us get back over 8,000, and I'm hoping that by that next 2030 census, we can reverse that needle. Right, we've been 40 years going down. Maybe we can, bring that up for a change. And I'm proud. I've had an opportunity to do some things that will make that a reality. I think we've approved some different housing projects throughout the city so we can get back to growing.
Cool. So what for our viewers and for myself too, just to help me out understand more about what the city commission does and what the commissioners do, what is a city commission and what role do they play in St. Joe, for
Yeah,
example?
so City Commission, for those of us that live here in the city of St. Joe, it's that closest body of government to you that can have that impact on your day to day life. Everything from who's going to pick up my trash, to am I going to get my water, my sewer, the roads that I drive on. There's who's going to fix those and who's responsible for
Yeah.
taking care of those. The downtown, all of our sidewalks. Right down to the street plowing and all of those services that we rely on. Some of the bigger ones that I didn't even mention, public safety. So my job as a city commissioner is to kind of oversee all of those operations. The city is St. Joseph. We have a city manager that and that's really been one of my big jobs that we've done this term is we had the opportunity. Our past city manager retired. And that's a pretty important position to have in the city because that's the person that ultimately runs the day-to-day operations, for the city. And the city commission, is in charge of making that decision of who's going to be the city manager. So that was one big one we got to do. And that ends up playing a part into, how your city operates, right? The city manager's job ends up being to kind of be the right arm of the city commission and the things that the city commission decides, as far as how will we spend the budget, which new developments will get approved, all of those decisions that we make end up then getting executed by the city manager.
So city manager, that's just mayor. Is that a mayor, or is it
No,
different?
it's more of a daily operations.
And we do have a mayor.
So yeah, let me tell you a little bit about our mayor system here in St. Joe. So I'm one of the 5 city commissioners that we have, and in this election, there's going to be 3 of our seats of the 5 total seats on the commission are up for grabs, right? That's by design. Every 2 years, we hold an election, and 3 seats are always up. The top 2 winners end up getting a 4-year term, and then that 3rd place winner gets a 2-year term, so that the next time you have 2 holdovers that will remain on the council, and then 3 seats up for grabs. And that's a nice way to ensure you always have some level of consistency, and then there's always the opportunity for voters to make their choices and spin the city in different directions with those choices and stuff. Once the 5 commissioners get elected, though, the very first thing that we have to do is pick a mayor. So we don't have a directly elected mayor in St. Joseph.
Oh, wow. I was not aware of that.
Yes.
So, okay.
So that'll be the very first important decision that we make. And that one's going to be slated to happen on November 17th. Our current mayor is Brooke Thomas, and she got selected because 2023 at the organizational meeting, the 5 new commissioners, myself included, had that discussion and voted her as the mayor, and she's served. So this year, once we seat with the 5, then we'll look around the table and decide which one is mayor. The short version of how it works.
Okay.
But we're responsible for allocating the city's budget, approving expenditures to that. Any modifications, once we set that, city commission is responsible for that. And then there's a lot of other daily things. Changes to the zoning is a big portion of what we're responsible for. Outside of the budgetary, those are the 2 chief responsibilities, is making those zoning changes and stuff. So that's in a nutshell. A lot of it ends up, most of the decisions that we make are, around how we're allocating the city's resources, approving an expenditure that staff has requested. And a lot of the times those are, within budgets, but certainly if there's any exceptions or changes, then all of that is the stuff that commissioners get to review. So, and it's important because then those zoning decisions that ends up translating into what people can do and what they can't do with their homes and their properties based on those zoning restrictions and stuff. And that's been another thing that over the last couple of years I've been diving into on the commission. And it's exciting because next year we'll be looking into redoing our zoning ordinances completely, which when I was talking earlier about St. Joe has been, declining in population, right? Why is that, right? Why are people choosing not to live here and develop their housing here, and develop other things here? It's development's been very stagnant in St. Joe historically for the last 40 years. And a big part of that is because the rules that guide that, which is our zoning regulations, are super complicated. The book is the book is about this long. It's taller than these cans, and it's very contradictory in parts. And it's a result of and something really cool I want to share is you can kind of see the visualization of what I'm about to share if you take a drive through the city. But when the city was growing, they came up with some of those zoning rules to guide that growth, right? And in the beginning, the city was very compact, very dense. If you go downtown, everything's very close together. Even bleeding out to where you guys live, things are kind of closer together. And as time went on and those rules expanded, by the time you reached into the 60s and 70s, instead of building a lot of the stuff similar to what you see downtown, where everything's close together, a lot of those zoning rules changed to be single-family residence, and there was a lot of different extra things added, like extra setbacks, bigger setbacks, right? And everything new that was being built followed those new guidelines. And so if you drive in, from the city, and if you start downtown and you go south towards like Hilltop, you really see this pronounced because everything will just spread out.
Yeah,
you see the lot sizes get bigger.
Yeah.
And that's a result. And that's part of why, bigger houses, more space per house, harder requirements. It makes it harder and harder to do things and modify properties. And so over time, that becomes less attractive, to developers, if it's very hard to do something, and it's difficult for homeowners, who are evolving families, right? I think about my family as a good example of this. We had to move twice because our family grew, and it happens. It's part of, life. But what you don't want to happen is you don't want your city's rules to come in conflict with those choices and those evolutions in people's families, right? So
Right.
you want it ideally as, hey, I just had a new kid, maybe I need to look into a housing expansion. You want the rules that govern how can I modify my own home, change my garage, things like that. You want it to be easy and make sense. Um, that's not the case with the rules in St. Joe. They're very complicated. So I'm super excited about having an opportunity to help rewrite those to be kind of simpler, so that and I've focused a lot on homeowners, but the bulk of where I hear the frustration with kind of our complicated spider web of zoning ordinances is really when you get into our businesses and the downtown, and people wanting to kind of change their business models, make changes to their storefronts. It's really hard to do that, so revamping those rules and making them simpler is a big thing I'm excited to do.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed that on South State, where I live, and exactly what you're saying. As you go the other direction, yeah, the properties get a little bit more expansive that way. Um, so let's talk a little bit about what you've done so far, and what are you most proud of so far?
Yeah, I mean, most proud of the fact that I mentioned the population decline. And I really focus on that one because putting it into the context of the fact that St. Joseph used to be a city of 13,000 people, and it is now only 7,700, and we're trying to get
Yeah.
it back to 8,000 or more. You have the reality and the problem that you still have the same roads that were built to support that amount of people. You still have the water infrastructure and all of these systems to support 13,000 people, but you have a fraction of that left that has to take care of it, right? And that includes things like public safety and all of the services, to keep things clean and operational, not to mention repairs. So when you have fewer and fewer people taking care of that, you and I both know what that means. It means people that are left behind are paying higher taxes to take care of things, right? So it's pivotal to stop losing people so that there's more of us to kind of share in that burden, in that tax burden, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have fewer people left to maintain the same level of resources, because the people leave, the roads don't. You still have to take care of them. It's critical that you start growing and bringing more people in, because 40 years from now, if you don't do that, it's just not a good trajectory to be on when you can't take care of your assets. And when you look at our assets, there's a lot that we need to take care of. And I'm looping into the second thing I'm most proud of here, is because we've had a lot of deferred maintenance in St. Joseph. A lot of the roads and other stuff that I'm referencing could have been taken a long time ago. And if we would have had a really robust, asset management plan and been thoughtful about
Mm-hmm.
taking care of the roads, the strategy was very much not that. It was, let's see how long this lasts before we absolutely have to touch it, was the old strategy. And that changed even before I came on the council. But what I'm really proud of is we've been willing to dive into the tough and hard issues that past commissions, and not just recent past commissions, but generations haven't touched. So one of those things, the paid parking, for example. I'm proud of our commission for being willing to jump in and try to do something about that, right? Ideally, hindsight's 2020, but
Yeah.
what we should have been doing all along was figuring out ways to innovate and weave the parking and mesh it better, right? We just threw up some parking lots back in the day and hoped for the best, and we just haven't changed it in a long time. So we tried that, in the paid parking. I think we both know how that turned out, right? And everybody listening, knows that did not turn out the way that any of us wanted it to. from a commission perspective, the real issue we were trying to tackle was, what can we do to make it easier to get to the downtown? Because I hear from so many residents, I don't even go there in the summertime, and it's my town because I just know to avoid it, right? And we would hear from people, saying, well, you guys are losing customers because every time someone can't get in, and circles the block and leaves, it's hurting us. So we had business community telling us, hey, there's economic data that shows if you don't do something about your congestion, you're hurting yourselves by not making it easier to get in and enjoy, right? People are missing out on what you guys have. And you couple that with, strong resident feedback of, it's just really frustrating to get down there. We felt strongly we had to do something. And, past commissions had kind of given us a head start on some of that work, had, kind of been underlying. And so by the time I got elected in 2023, a lot of that stuff was all already fully in motion. Those consultants that the city brought in had already been hired, and we were basically just waiting for their results. And once we got them, then we had to make a decision. Do we do what we've always done and just not address it, or do we try something? And we opted to try something. And what we tried, we ended up pausing it. There was a couple of different issues, with combination of some technical issues with installation that didn't go well, along with just a lot of feedback, that really, for me, highlighted that the process that we did, no matter how good we thought it may have been at gathering community feedback, it's not it didn't land, right? It's not being received the way that we thought it would. And so that, for me, signaled, no matter how hard we tried, there was a disconnect, right? So it was on us to, then kind of figure out, how do we move forward? We decided to pause, the program. Even before the pause, we knew this was going to be something that, a monumental change, right? From something that the community hasn't done in a long time. So anything that we did, we knew we wanted to be able to modify and change and give ourselves the flexibility to respond quickly to whatever feedback, or data that we were collecting to show us this is or isn't working, and what do we need to change. And so, to give you kind of some specific examples of some of that, we launched the program with a certain time frame, and we were making adjustments, based on utilization and feedback of, hey, you're charging too long into the night, right? So we trimmed it down. We're making different changes. We introduced different passes. Not to, talk all about paid parking and stuff, this evening, but the end result that we landed on, we brought a lot more people to the table, right? It's something that everybody had something to say about paid parking. And, once we had, launched it, and it became a real tangible thing. Because the funny thing is, we actually approved it in 2024. And the summer of 2024 is when we, announced the plan, what it was going to look like. And feedback was actually relatively quiet in comparison to when the program actually started, and the meters were in the ground, and it was real in 2025. I actually expected a lot of the feedback we got earlier, but it's a good example of why local government is so important, and why I'm glad that we're doing a podcast like this, and that people care more about, what's going on in the city of St. Joseph than they did before, because it's hard in local government to get people to pay attention. Most people know who the president is, but they'll struggle to name their congress people, let alone their state legislators. And, city commissioners are, we could literally be anybody, right? And we are, so it's just not something that's popular. But something like paid parking got a lot more people to the table. And as someone I work as a community organizer, I actually always like it when more people are at the table and giving their opinions, because where that's going to lead us in the future of what does paid parking look like in St. Joe, or what does just parking look like, I can tell you what it won't be. It won't be what we had this summer, right? But what it will be is going to be, and to be completely clear. The decision is not going to be solely up to me. I'm hoping to be one of the five, that will get to make that decision on what parking looks like in 2026. But a couple of the things that, have been very strongly, imparted on me that are going to be important in this decision going forward. Residents don't want to pay, for the pass, to their own city, and they don't want to think about a transaction, every single time, they go by, go down to, downtown to visit the coffee shop or do whatever it is they want. So it's on us to, to have, if there's paid parking involved, how does that impact the residents, and what does a pass for the residents look like, and what does the registration look like? Because I think that's an absolute must-have, for not just City of St. Joe residents, but finding a way to expand any pass that we give to our residents to make that available to just broader Berrien County residents. So those are a couple of things that we're talking about right now. Just to kind of give you the inside scoop, I'm on the parking subgroup, and those are a few of the ideas that we're focusing on how to make those work, because the object of the paid parking program when it started is the same goal that we have today: is how can we make it easier to get downtown, not how can we make the most money from the people that are going downtown. So we tried paid parking system last year as it was last year, and it didn't work that way. So anything that includes a paid component, it's going to be very different in how that translates to St. Joe residents, and I would fully expect how it translates to Berrien County residents as well, because we want to make it easier, not scare people off, and so we'll get there. I have every confidence in that, but it's the long-term solution, with parking, I think is going to be really in how can we make the best use of space. So a surface parking lot, parking, it's something that we need. Our culture, our society is just so car heavy driven that we can never, it's not reasonable to expect that we can get away, from cars, or certainly not get away from cars very quickly, right? So you have to make plans, for parking and accommodate that. But how we do that, I think that's our opportunity for solving our parking issue, which is a very seasonal type of issue, that we have in our community. So how can we solve that? And I think it's integrating, the parking with the architecture, better. An example of that, the Marquette is another proposal that we've had.
Right.
And the Marquette is something that has been kind of one of those things that I first started talking about it shortly after getting elected. We started getting briefed by the city manager at the time. Hey, the property owners of this lot are interested in selling their property and developing it. And what are your thoughts, type of thing. And over the last 2 years, we've seen that evolve to, we got a formal proposal, to purchase our parking lot, in order to make this project, and I'll talk a little bit more about the project here. But one of the things that I think we can learn from on this project and potentially apply it to other projects, that are still to come, in the city, is that they're integrating the parking underground, right? And they're finding a way to, instead of this piece of land, because the city of St. Joseph is what the city of St. Joseph is. It can't grow any further to the east, west, north, or south. We're an established footprint. So looking at a current parking lot, we get its value as a parking lot, right? In the Marquette's instance, their proposal involved purchasing that parking lot and then replacing it, as part of a larger structure that they're making that replaces the 57 city-owned parking lots, spots that they're going to be buying and then replacing for us. And then it also has additional parking that they need in order to accommodate the things that they're building, which is 100 residential units and then some commercial space. So it's important because you get both in that case, right? Rather than having just a surface parking lot, you still get the parking and you get the commercial space. And in the Marquette's case, this is a very housing heavy project. They're bringing in It's 32 condo units and then 62, I believe, rentals. And those are actually going to be really big, because as we talk about population decline and how do we get more residents, because more residents is what we need so that we can have spread the tax burden more evenly, right, by growing. 100 or 60 rental units is going to be huge, because in this case in particular, those rental units are going to be controlled as part of the structure of how the Marquette's project is actually proposed. They're utilizing different credits from the state of Michigan and brownfield credits, which our city commission approved earlier this week. But in order to utilize those mechanisms, they have to provide those apartment units within a certain range. Those rents are going to be within a certain range. And the average monthly rent on those units that they're proposing is going to be about $1,800, which compared to other rental properties in the area was really exciting to a lot of the people that I've talked to that live that renter reality. Lifelong renters that I know are, they're excited about those rates. And so that's an important component, because the people that are going to end up living in those apartments, you'll get young families, that have yet to have children, or maybe they have one, one child. You'll get graduates, you'll get people looking to downsize, right? The thing with housing in our community is we need all types of it right now. It's not just any one type of housing can fix kind of the broader housing crisis that not just St. Joe has, but the state of Michigan, and we're seeing it across the country in many places. There's no magic pill, right? The Marquette is going to help, and it's got some rentals and it's got some condos, so it's got two different types. But that's not the one thing. The Marquette is 100 residential units, but I mentioned, I really wanted to get to 8,000, right? A couple other things that we've approved. There's a Clark Logic owns a building on Hilltop. And they had a piece of their property was a commercial zoned parking lot. And just a couple months ago, we approved them rezoning that, and their intention is to turn that into some apartment units. Lookout Point is another recent development that's gone up this year. If you drive south out of the city and you look on your left, after you get past Lookout Park along the lake, you'll notice Lookout Point, and that's actually Corwell, the hospital, owns those.
Okay.
And they use it as resident, doctor housing, for they're a teaching hospital, and so they use it to house their their doctors that they're teaching. And they're an example that they're kind of trying to take the housing crisis into their own hands and participate in their own rescue. They've taken it into buying land and turning it into the housing rather than relying on communities, to build it for them. They're trying to help us do that, right? So that's another, example. They put up, I think it's at least 60 more units in their more recent addition. So Harbor Shores is another one to the north of the city. They've got another big expansion plan, and that one has potential for 150 new housing units when they're all done over the next several years. So the path is there, for 300 more housing units. And as you guys, you and I know, it's not always just one person per house, right? In my case, I've got 6 people in my house, right? You've got, yourself and your wife. So houses come in different sizes. So 300 housing units could be 300 people. It could easily be up to 1,000 people, right? Depending on the size of the families. So it puts us on the path to regrow. So I'm really excited to have been a part of that for the last, 2 years. But I have a big election coming up on Tuesday. So if I'm successful and I win, there's a lot more work to do.
Sounds like
there's
it.
a lot more to do. One last big one that I'll give you with is just this week, actually, on Tuesday, the city was officially received its redevelopment ready certification, and that's been I want to say a 6 or 7 year project that the city has been undertaking. It included a series of different ordinance revisions, kind of things that the city has to do, and processes and plans, forward-thinking plans that it has to produce and show that it's got an asset management plan to take care of its roads, sewers, water, all of those,
Okay.
things. We had to develop a plan and show that we're, keeping that plan, maintaining it, following it, building those improvements into your budget. Those are just a few of the things that we had to do in order to get that redevelopment ready certification. And now that we have, achieved that, it's going to help us do all of, some of the things that I just talked about, like building more housing, making it easier for, our business owners and residents to, apply for permits when they need to make changes to their stores and stuff. So
Okay. All right. So that's a lot.
that's a lot.
Okay. So let's break it down for the average Joe like myself, and the people that live here that might not even know we have a city commission. Obviously, I know, but a lot of people don't know. All they care about, and myself included, what are you doing for us? They break it down. Like, give me 3 or 4 things that, if you get reelected, what are you going to be driving for? What are your things? What are your top priorities, and how does that affect the residents in St. Joe?
Yeah, I think so. The biggest way, my first term, I feel like it's a lot of the groundwork, and we've kind of crossed a lot of milestones, right? We got that redevelopment ready certification.
Yep.
We approved a project, downtown for the first time in 40 years. So what's next? Keep on doing those things, is obviously first and foremost. But the city's more than just the downtown, right? So want to continue on with the downtown development and finding ways to bring more folks to our city. But one thing that, as a dad, I feel this one kind of acutely, because every day I take my kids to school. Here in the city, they go to Lincoln School Elementary.
Oh, yeah.
I see the crossing guards, and Lincoln School is actually very close to Napier, so it's one of our busier in and outs. So pedestrian safety is another thing, and the city is in the process of we applied for a grant already, and have a plan, and we're in the process of developing that plan and waiting to see if we'll get that grant it's a Safe Streets grant.
What does that do?
So what that does is, it would help us. To get the grant, you have to showcase, hey, we have a plan to upgrade, our streets and crossings and stuff as a city. And this is something we're hoping to do citywide. If you get the grant, then that helps you have the funds to actually execute that plan. And then we would have, 5 years. So hoping that in first quarter of 2026, we'll have the results of that grant. And if we get that, what that will mean is that what you can look forward to is over the next 5 years is what this particular grant is.
Uh-huh.
Look for the city to start implementing its action plans and improvements around those sidewalks and stuff.
Some examples.
Right along Napier, going to Lincoln School, the crossings there, downtown. And downtown is going to be one of the biggest redesigns that probably ever happened in St. Joseph in 2027.
What's going on?
Main Street that goes literally right down the middle and the heart of our downtown.
Uh-huh.
That's going to get completely redone. And therein lies an opportunity, because that gives us the next couple of years. MDOT's, going to take care of the road, and they're going to do things to the road. The city is going to be taking care of a lot of the things, the infrastructure stuff that are underneath the road.
Okay.
We can get this Safe Streets grant, though, for example. And it doesn't all hinge on, the Safe Streets grant. If we don't get that, we still have our opportunity to make our plans ourselves. It would sure help, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But that Main Street redesign, we'll have a good opportunity to put in our, MDOT will do what MDOT does, but the city can then go above and beyond that in the redesign of the streetscaping and the crossings specifically. And that, I think, as we look into just general safety of the city, you got to just make crossing Main Street easier and safer for pedestrians. And then as we think about trying to grow our downtown and develop more things, in our downtown, if you're going to be developing the downtown, then hopefully that means more pedestrians. And if you're going to be inviting more pedestrians, then that means it's really in your best interest to redesign. If you're going to be having that road redone anyways, redesign it in a way that is the most pedestrian friendly, as possible. So that's going to be a big thing that happens over the next 2 years, that hopefully myself and the other commissioners will be able to guide that to be something that the community is going to be really happy with. But that's a big opportunity, and then we have several throughout the city to make it more crossable and walkable and stuff. So expect to see more things, that make it easier and more attractive. I'm also a big fan of making good use of our spaces and capitalizing, on what's special about the different places. Did you know that we have 17 different city parks in St. Joe?
I couldn't know. If you asked me to name all of them, I could probably do it on one hand. Kiwanis Park, Froggy Park. What else? Milton Park. Yeah, I know that's a lot of parks.
There's a lot of parks, and
that's a lot.
And I think about, are we getting the best use of space? So there's been some plans in the last couple of years to, around the development of some of those parks that I'm looking forward to seeing that continue. Paddler Park is one that I want to give a special shout out to. We just got the master plan approved for Paddler Park earlier in the year. And they're going to get some help. The Harbor Shores redevelopment is going to give that a boost and help a lot with that. But that's another little special park that I think having those things in your city and taking proper care of them, so that you can draw people to them, give them things to do. That's another big part of how I think, it's one thing to approve the housing and build the housing, the housing units, for people, but you also want to do things that make it an exciting place to go. So there's been a lot more events and stuff downtown. I mean, there's always events that happen downtown. St. Joe today, for example, is a great partner in doing that. But I think in recent years, the city has become a more willing partner to do more things, right? And host even more events, and just center things on the whole theme of, St. Joe is just the best place to live, and it's got the best places to do. So bring your family here and spend the rest of your life here. So that's what I'm hoping to be a part of.
Well, that's exciting. And being residents that, and I know you're really active and your family's active and we're active. We love walking around the city, and these things are exciting to me because that's going to mean we're going to have a better experience just being out and crossing Main Street, because I live right on Main Street, as you know. So yeah. I'm really looking forward to that. And that also, like you said, it ties into just attracting more people that will have more of a magnetic pull by the city by having different things to do.
Yes.
So that's great.
So it's key because I mean you have so much, so much variety. Like, you like walking, I'm a big dog guy.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I have a dog, so she likes to walk him. My kids like biking. My neighbor is a big cyclist, and so there's a lot of, excitement about, developing a bike path. But it's all along the same thing of giving people the choice to do the things that they want to do. And if you make it available to them, they'll want to be here. And so if we can the more we can offer them, the more attractive our city becomes for them to live here.
Yeah.
So,
that's great. Yeah, I know. I agree. That's really good. And that's exciting stuff. So, because this, what I'm hearing, okay, just as a layman guy, from what I'm hearing, what I learned today, and thank you because I learned quite a lot, is there's a partnership between the residents and the city council.
Yes.
Yep. And it's a partnership that is really important to have that communication, right? I'm just kind of repeating back what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
So on the communication front, because now we have all these different ways to connect digitally. There's Slack, there's Facebook groups. Right now, I don't believe there's nothing like that currently, is there?
No, we don't have a direct message, a commissioner type of function. We're moving in the right direction in terms of municipal communication to residents, and for years, it's really easy to, I think municipal governments kind of did the minimum that they were expected, right? They post on their websites, when their meetings are, but my commission meetings are the second and fourth Mondays, of the month at 6 p.m. It's it's a really weird time if you got a family, right? You might have soccer practice, football
Yeah, yeah,
practice,
yeah.
people getting off
Hmm.
work. Like there's a number of different reasons why you may not be able to make it to a Monday unless you have something specifically that that is on your mind. And I think that's the case for most residents. They're busier living their lives. They don't typically have time to go to every meeting per se, right? They'll typically interact with their city government when there's something in their neighborhood or something that applies to them that they're passionate about. But for the most part, people don't interact. And changing that and making it more commonplace is part of what I am hoping to do with podcasts, and things like this. As a city government, we've gotten better at, we've launched. So, for example, we get a lot of public comment at meetings. You know, we've made a little FAQ, so that we're collecting those and trying to report back the answers. Those should be appearing, in the future on the city website as a new feature. But even just some simple things. I know last year um, I had recommended to the rest of the council that we record our meetings, and we adopted that and made that change. So it's like even things as simple as that. It's like so much easier to be able to not guess what your city councilor said, but be able to just watch the meeting and hear it for yourself. The agenda minutes never do the actual meeting justice, or the paper write up the next day, is never,
Right, right,
as
right.
good as seeing it yourself. So we've made strides in that. The city also hired a new communications director because like part of our conversation with people don't know what city commissioners do, who I am and what I do. And so the same is true for all of the things that the city does. So hiring a communications
Hmm.
person to help us put out there, these are the recent decisions that we've made, these are things going on. um, we've gotten better at trying to host different events. Like we Monday, we approved that Marquette project, but there was also some. Unless you're really into municipal stuff, you probably don't know what a TIF is, which it stands for tax increment financing. It's one of the super important things that we were approving, but it's something that it's very difficult to just wrap your head around it if you're just sitting in a meeting, at the city commission meeting, and you hear about it for the first time. Um, we had held at City Hall an educational session, to kind of focus on that, and teaching people. So things like that, need to continue to happen, right? Newsletters need to be sent out to residents. We just need to continue to be better. And I don't think we could ever possibly over communicate the stuff that we're doing at City
Oh
Hall.
no, no way. No,
So
no.
it's hard enough to get, usually you're relying on something that is, a really big deal that gets people to pay attention to you. So improvements need to, kind of continue to be constant. But as far as myself personally, our email addresses are at least on the city website, and so anybody's able to email us at any time. And frequently I do get emails from residents. I've met hundreds of different residents, either exchange messages back and forth, or met them up for coffee, or we coordinated to
Hmm.
chat before or after a meeting. I think that's face to face is always the best way to get in touch with someone. I tell people, if you're ever curious what we're doing, like come to a meeting. But if you do that, stay after and chat, if you can, or come early and chat, or shoot us a message, and try to get yourself a one-on-one, conversation. Because the meetings, they follow we're following a very legal procedure, if you will. There's the agenda, we're only talking about things that are predetermined, and agreed upon on
Hmm.
the agenda, and everything has to happen with emotion. And my point is, it's a very different experience, to hear your commissioners, talk up there behind the podium, where we're following certain rules, where to do something you have to do it through emotion and voting and stuff, versus um, and even in public comment, where it's not so much a dialogue thing,
Hmm.
where I think that frustrates people. That's why I always tell people, just catch us outside, because we're really listening there. But you might ask a really good question that I just might not have the answer right on the spot all the time, right? Or um, public comment just usually functions as an info gathering session and doesn't give you that best opportunity to really just engage back and forth. So I always welcome it, and I've had a lot of good conversations, as a result of, people just shoot me an email. So
Good.
keep doing it.
Well, good. Well, that's great. And all of this information will be in the show notes for this podcast, so we'll be able to find out, how to contact the City Commission, the St. Joe City website, all that we'll put in the show notes. So anyone's interested, they can find all that contact information there. And Michael Fernandez, good luck.
Thank you.
November 4th.
Appreciate it.
Election day in St. Joe. Get out and vote. Very important. And thanks for joining us. I'm Tom Castonzo with Democracy Brewing. Cheers.
There we go.